Beat your plowshares into swords.
Hi everybody, I'm Reverend Jim Keat, Riverside's digital minister.
And I'm Reverend Adrian Thorne, Riverside's senior minister. And this is
The Word Made Fresh. I did it with you because we're finally in person and we can do that.
Yay!
This is the weekly show where we talk about upcoming narrative lectionary passages, giving you ideas for sermons, Bible studies, or if you just like to learn about this really, really old book, which we like to learn about this book.
Love it.
Yeah. So we're talking about Isaiah,
Yeah.
because the narrative lectionary brings us to Isaiah. Last week was Micah, which I preached that sermon, fantastic, and Isaiah, and then Habakkuk comes next. So before we get there, Isaiah, what's going on in this portion of Isaiah? It's Isaiah 36 and 37, and then a callback to Isaiah chapter 2. What's happening?
Correct. So there's a king whose name I never remember, who is trying to get inside of the people's head, trying to scare them, I think, intimidate them, and their king Hezekiah. He says, listen, I have destroyed all of these other nations. What makes you think that I'm not going to destroy you? Your God didn't save those other people. Your God's not going to save you. So King Hezekiah, I like to say, like my kid maybe sometimes, is just having like a temper tantrum, just tearing their robes and crying and like, oh my God, we've been abandoned. God doesn't love me. And what I love about this text is, of course, God has not forgotten God's people. God is there for them. And what God says about them is very different from what the king says about them. God says that they are people who beat swords into plowshares. And that's where I'm going. I'm thinking of going in this direction that focuses on the voices in our heads, how the enemy, how other people, how their opinions can get in our heads very easily and make us forget that we are people called to justice, that we are people called to love, especially on this Reign of Christ Sunday.
I just think like the person who feels called to be an artist and they have the voices in their head of family saying, but what are you you need a backup job. What are you going to do to make money?
When are you going to get a real job? That was my family.
So yeah, voices in our head definitely jumps off the page and is everywhere in these spaces.
Yeah, yeah. And even Jesus, you know, when we think about his life, had voices in his head. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when he's just begging that the cup pass and that he not have to take the journey that has been set before him. Even the people that we most admire, like Jesus, have moments, I think, when they too need to be reminded of who they are and who God created them to be.
So how do we do that? Like, maybe you can get us into how King Hezekiah did that, but I'm thinking of the world we're living in with so many voices in our head telling us who we are, how to show up, or how to whatever. How do we discern which ones to turn up, turn down, mute button, all that kind of a thing?
Yeah, so I say this to my kid, but also folks I talk to who are just in such great despair right now, especially not so far away from elections, not knowing what's coming up with the end of the year, with climate change. There are a lot of things that are in our heads and in our hearts right now. And I think, like our spiritual ancestors, we want to go back to that old book, right? There's a lot in there that reminds us of who God said we are. We beat swords into plowshares. We are beloved. We are friend of God. In us, God is well pleased. Certainly there are the Psalms where we also get to lament and weep and cry with those who did those things, but there are also those Psalms that turn mourning into joy, and all of that is our legacy. And I think that's a great place to start. I think when we're trying to get clear about who we are in God.
Yeah, because I think of like just the history, not very recent history, of the voice that the church has put in people's heads. Queer people, trans people, like you aren't whatever, you aren't. Women, people of color. Anyone who's not a white, straight, cis man has heard a certain, and I've heard a certain voice in my head. You are chosen by God. You're the divine. No, we all are.
We all are. Yeah, that's really powerful. And I also think that the church and society in general is also putting some thoughts in our heads. So again, talking with kids that I know, they're very caught up in being TikTok famous, and going viral, and very concerned about what's happening outside of themselves. And you know, we read a devotional this morning at my house where we were looking at the inside. There's a book called, I don't know if it's called The Mole, the Boy, the Horse, and the Dog.
I have it.
It's a
My
great
mom got it
book.
for me. I haven't read it yet.
Such a great book.
Good.
So there's a quote that says something like, we are so concerned about what's happening on the outside, but the stuff that really matters is actually happening on the inside. And so when kids are so caught up with how they look, and did I get a glow up? Did people like my thing?
Yeah.
All of that stuff is so external, and where we need to be is focused on our insides, our thoughts and our hearts and our spirits. Because I believe that's where the true beauty is. That's the light of God that shines on us that we then get to reflect to the world.
Yeah, I think that self-awareness, self-confidence, where you aren't dependent upon someone else defining who you are externally, or all those voices we hear being your true north, and you can actually listen, no, that's not who I am. This is who I am, and I'm going to go this way because of that. Right.
And then you can put that on TikTok if you want, because hey, everybody needs that good message.
Okay, so I have some questions for you specifically about this text. This is I did some homework.
Okay.
Just because partly, because I went in major Bible geek mode. Brace yourself.
Good.
So last week, Micah was a prophet under King Hezekiah. I did a little research on that for a sermon and all that stuff. Hezekiah is a character in this one, so that's the same kind of layover. And then I started reading this passage. So let's see, Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. Let's have you read this one first.
He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
Okay, so that's Isaiah, a prophet during the time of King Hezekiah.
Yes.
And now let's go to Micah chapter 4, verse 3.
He shall judge between many peoples, and shall arbitrate between strong nations far away. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Look at that.
What?
We thought that was always Isaiah,
I know,
right?
I know.
You knew. Micah came first?
That's the question.
Well, see, there's three pieces of Isaiah, right? There's three.
But
you guys may not know this. There's three Isaiahs.
Yeah, they're not all Isaiah.
Yeah.
And Micah's not all Micah either.
Oh, okay.
But early Micah and late Micah are Micah. But
so there's two Micahs and three Isaiahs. It's a lot of people.
So the question has been, who wrote it first? Who's borrowing from whom?
Right.
And it's interesting because they're contemporaries of one another. So do you have any ideas on this?
Well, I'm wondering if maybe this is one of the stories that was in their head, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this was something in the culture that everyone was saying, like, I don't know, what is something that all of us say? Just do it? I don't know. But maybe it was something like that.
Yeah,
it was just
it's
common.
Zeitgeist. It's part of the
common culture, the common knowledge.
That's where a lot of people land. There's
cool.
been language studies to put like the Greek and even the Hebrew next to each other and say who elaborated on whom, and they don't really know, but some do land on that. Maybe this was just kind of cultural framing metaphor that they just both borrowed from in the same instant.
Right, and how gorgeous is that, that was part of the framing metaphor back then.
Okay, but then it gets even more complicated.
Oh no.
Now we're going to read Joel chapter 3, verse 10.
Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weakling say, I am a warrior. Come on. This is the Bible. Why we love it. It is complicated and contradictory. Okay.
That was exactly the reaction I was hoping to get.
And of course, because obviously I've read Joel, not at all. So what was that about?
I don't know.
Where does he fall in the chronology?
Later, I think.
Later.
Someone help us out in the comments.
And maybe there was something going on in his context where he was like, later for that, we actually need a sword and a spear in this moment.
That's the thought. And then some dispensational theologies, which I don't like, they pitch it as that, like it's different dispensations.
Sure.
And I don't know, I haven't done all the research here, I just found it because I thought it was interesting, but I wonder if it was part of like the cultural language and then Joel is flipping it. And so when you like inverse the thing that everyone's used to, that's saying something.
Right.
That's my hunch, but I haven't backed that up with anything more than a hunch.
Yeah, because I'd like to know what Joel was saying, and that's why you can't just pick verses out of the Bible, because then you get in trouble. It's like, well, what did he say before that, and what did he say after? And what's the tone of the whole book? You got to read. Apparently, we have to go home and read Joel now.
Or maybe it's just a cycle. If you take your sword, turn it into a plowshare, and then it goes back into a sword.
Perhaps, but I somehow doubt it.
Yeah,
it sounds a little triumphalist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That part of Joel is very like, let's go beat everybody.
Yeah, let's go kick some butt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably why we don't hear that one in the church. Not the progressive ones, anyway. I'm sure it shows up somewhere.
Probably. Yeah, I can see some churches that would like that one.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, thanks for adding a complicating layer to my sermon preparation.
Good luck.
But this is helpful. This will make me do a little more digging, because this is kind of one of those texts that we're like, oh yeah, I've heard that one before. I know where this is going. It's about justice. It's about.
But have you? That's the thing.
Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly. That's why you got to read the whole book, people. You got to read the whole Bible. You got to read all of the
beginning to end.
All of the books in the book.
Takes you 3 years if you do 1 chapter a day.
Yeah.
All right. You know the drill. Questions, comments, ideas, put them in a comment. Shoot us a message, however you can, social media, whatever. Show up on a Sunday in person or online. We would love to talk more with you about the Bible. We'll be back next week with more of this, and keep reading the Bible, keep wrestling with it. Like you like to say, turn that gem and see new reflections of light.
See those new perspectives.
And then you got a sermon coming, and we'll all enjoy that and keep going from there.
All right.
See you next time.
Bye.
All right.